Hey there, and welcome to Tales by June, where hearts break, heal, and sometimes seek revenge. Let's begin today's story.
Hey, before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. They say love feels the same for the rich and the poor, but I'm not sure if that's true. Because when you're poor, love feels like a miracle you have to hold on to with both hands, afraid it might slip away the moment you blink. When I first met Ryan, I didn't see his money. I saw his smile. That easy, boyish smile that made it feel like the world was just a little kinder than it really was. He wasn't like the other rich boys in our college, loud, entitled, always making sure you knew their father's names. Ryan was different. Or at least, I thought he was. We met in freshman year, in the campus library of all places. I was behind a stack of old books, struggling to carry them, when he appeared out of nowhere. "Need help?" he asked, his voice warm, his eyes glinting with something playful. I remember stammering out a yes because back then, I didn't know how to act around boys who looked like they belonged in glossy magazine covers. That was how it started. Study sessions, walks after class, shared coffees I couldn't really afford, but he insisted on paying for. By the time the first year ended, we were inseparable. Or maybe, I was inseparable from him. I didn't realize then that love can be unbalanced, even when you're holding hands. I never hid who I was. My family was struggling, my clothes were simple, and my weekends were spent working part-time at a diner instead of at house parties. Ryan said he liked that about me, that I was real in a world full of people pretending. And I believed him. God, I believed every word. But then, everything changed. It was the beginning of our second year when she walked into our classroom for the first time. Emily. Her hair looked like it had been kissed by the sun, her nails were perfect, and she carried herself like she owned the ground she walked on. She was from money, the kind of money that made Ryan's wealth look ordinary. And from the way she glanced around the room, I could tell she was searching for someone who matched her world. That someone ended up being Ryan. At first, it was harmless. She'd sit near us during lectures, join in our group discussions. But then I started noticing the little things. Her hand brushing his arm when she laughed. The way she'd compliment his watch or his shoes, always finding an excuse to get closer. And Ryan, he didn't push her away. One afternoon, I walked into the cafeteria and found them sitting together at a table full of his friends. My seat empty. They were laughing at something, but when I approached, the laughter stopped. Emily gave me a smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "Oh, hey," she said, looking me up and down. "Didn't realize you'd be here." The table chuckled, but Ryan just stayed quiet, his eyes on his food. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. That was the first time I felt that burn in my chest. The kind of burn that doesn't come from anger alone, but from humiliation. I told myself I was imagining it, that Ryan was just being polite to her. But deep down, I knew a storm was coming. They say betrayal doesn't always happen in one big moment. Sometimes it's 1,000 small cuts, each one deep enough to sting, but never enough to bleed out completely. That was how it felt with Ryan after Emily arrived. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Of course he'd talk to her in class. Of course they'd work together on assignments. But then there were the looks. Not just between them, between her and me. Like she knew some secret I didn't. Like she'd already won a battle I didn't even know we were fighting. It started in the cafeteria. I walked in one afternoon, tray in hand, and spotted Ryan at his usual table. Only this time, Emily was beside him, leaning in close while his friends laughed at something she said. When I sat down, the laughter faded just slightly. "Hey," Ryan said quickly, almost like he was caught doing something he shouldn't. Emily smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Oh, didn't see you there. We were just talking about last weekend." Last weekend? Ryan had told me he spent it studying. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to look paranoid. But my food tasted like cardboard that day. Then came the group study session. I had walked into the library early, ready to work with Ryan and a couple of friends on our joint project. When I reached the table, Emily was in my usual seat, their laptops side by side, shoulders brushing. "Oh, Claire, do you mind sitting over there?" she asked sweetly, gesturing to a chair across from them. Before I could answer, Ryan said, "Yeah, maybe it's better so we can share the screen." My hands clenched under the table, but I swallowed it down. I told myself not to make a scene. But it wasn't just private moments. She started performing her presence in public. At the campus coffee shop, she'd walk past my table with Ryan, giggling about something I wasn't part of. At student events, she'd casually mention things they'd done together. "Oh, Ryan, remember when we..." She'd start, cutting herself off with a laugh when she saw me standing nearby. The worst was the whispers. One of my classmates leaned over in lecture and murmured, "You know, people are saying Ryan might like her." I laughed it off, but my cheeks burned, and then there were the subtle jabs from his friends. "She's really smart, Ryan. Matches your vibe," one of them said with a smirk. I waited for him to defend me. He didn't. I went home that night feeling like I was slowly becoming a ghost in my own relationship. Ryan was still mine, technically. But every laugh they shared, every secret glance, made me feel like I was losing him inch by inch. And he didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care. Springfest was supposed to be our thing. Last year, Ryan and I had spent the whole day together, eating funnel cake, laughing on the Ferris wheel, even winning a silly couples trivia game. This year, I'd been looking forward to it, hoping maybe, just maybe, we could get back to how we used to be. I dressed in my favorite jeans and a simple white blouse. I wasn't rich, but I'd taken extra care with my hair and makeup. I wanted to look nice for him. We'd agreed to meet by the main stage at noon. By 12:30, he still wasn't there. I called him. No answer. Texted him. Nothing. My stomach churned as I wandered through the festival, scanning the crowd. And then I saw him, by the dunk tank. Emily was perched on the stool in a tight red dress, her legs crossed, grinning as his friends stood around, laughing. Ryan was in the front, baseball in hand, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months, pure, unguarded joy. "Ryan," I called, weaving through the crowd. He turned, startled, like he hadn't expected me to find him. "Hey," he said casually, almost dismissively. "We were just, having fun." Emily leaned forward on the stool, water dripping from her hair, flashing me that smile that wasn't a smile. "Oh, Claire, you should have seen it. He's so good at this game. Maybe he can win you a prize next." The crowd chuckled. One of his friends muttered, "If she can afford the entry fee." The words hit like a slap. I felt heat crawl up my neck, my chest tightening. Ryan heard it, he had to, but he didn't say a word. He just looked at me like I was overreacting. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice shaking. Emily tilted her head. "We're all talking, unless you have something private to say." The way she said it, mock sweet, dripping with condescension, something in me snapped. I stepped forward until we were inches apart. "I'm done with your games," I said, my voice low but shaking with fury. Her smirk deepened. "Games? Oh, Claire, if you're so insecure, maybe you should talk to your boyfriend about it. Unless you already know the truth." And before I could think, before I could stop myself, my hand connected with her cheek. The sound was sharp, cutting through the chatter of the crowd. Gasps erupted. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Emily's eyes went wide, her hand flying to her face. She looked at Ryan, who immediately stepped between us. "What the hell, Claire?" he shouted, his voice full of shock, and something worse, disgust. "She's been trying to break us up for months," I yelled, my voice trembling, half from rage, half from hurt. Emily's lip trembled, her eyes glistening with tears. I didn't believe for a second. I was just trying to be nice. She's always hated me. Ryan turned on me. "Apologize. Right now." The command in his voice was like a punch to the gut. "No," I said, shaking my head. His jaw tightened. "If you can't even admit you're wrong." "I'm not wrong." I cut in, my voice cracking. "I've been patient, Ryan. I've been humiliated, ignored, treated like I'm invisible, and you just stood there. Every single time." The crowd was silent now, the festival noise fading into a dull roar in my ears. Ryan's expression hardened. "Then we're done." He turned away, guiding Emily through the crowd like she was something fragile that needed protecting. And I stood there, surrounded by strangers, feeling like my heart had just been ripped out in front of everyone. That was the moment I knew. Whatever we'd had was gone. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to start thinking about my life without him in it. The week after Springfest felt like walking through the ruins of something I once called home. Everywhere I went on campus, I saw pieces of him, pieces of us. The bench by the library where he'd once wrapped his jacket around me because I'd forgotten mine. The path by the lake where he'd confessed he'd never met anyone like me. The little cafe off campus where we'd shared a slice of cheesecake because I couldn't afford my own. Those memories used to warm me. Now, they cut deeper than any insult Emily could throw at me. I used to think Ryan and I were a team. We'd dreamed together, talked about traveling after graduation, about finding a tiny apartment where the rent was cheap and the nights were ours. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. His world started to glitter in ways mine never could, and instead of pulling me closer, he let me fade into the background. We didn't speak after the festival. Not a word. Not a text. It was as if we'd silently agreed to erase each other, even though we were still in the same classes, still crossed paths in the cafeteria. At first, it hurt so badly I could barely focus in lectures. I'd catch myself looking at the door, expecting him to walk in and smile at me like nothing had happened. But the more I waited, the more I realized this wasn't a pause. This was the end. And if it was the end, I needed to start thinking about what came next. I buried myself in my studies, pouring every ounce of energy into assignments, staying late in the library, taking on extra projects. If I couldn't have the life we dreamed of together, I'd make my own. Of course, Emily didn't make it easy. Sometimes she'd accidentally bump into me in the hallway, her designer perfume lingering after she walked away. "Oops, sorry, Claire," she'd say, her voice dripping with insincerity. Other times I'd pass by her table in the cafeteria and hear the tail end of a comment. "She's trying so hard lately. Guess she needs something to fill her time." Laughter would follow. I'd keep walking, my fists tight at my sides. I didn't respond. Not once. It wasn't because I was afraid. It was because I'd decided they weren't worth my words anymore. Every night, I'd sit at my desk looking at brochures for graduate programs abroad. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my parents, and definitely not Ryan. This was my plan, my escape. And when the time came, I'd be gone before he even knew what had happened. But sometimes late at night, I'd still think about the boy who'd once carried my books in the library, and I'd wonder, when exactly did he stop looking at me like I was his world? It didn't take long for Ryan to make his next move. 2 weeks after Springfest, they made it official. Ryan and Emily. They didn't exactly announce it, but they didn't have to. They walked through campus like a royal couple, his hand in hers, her laughter echoing down the hallways. They sat together in lectures, shared coffee between classes, and posted pictures at the kind of restaurants I'd never be able to afford. It was all there, perfectly framed for everyone to see, including me. I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting at first. But after everything, after the public humiliation, after he'd let her tear me apart without lifting a finger, I realized his new relationship wasn't about love. It was about me. He wanted me to see them. He wanted me to crumble. But I didn't. When I passed them on the quad, I kept my head high and my pace steady. If he was holding her hand, I didn't look at it. If she laughed a little too loudly when I walked by, I didn't turn my head. It wasn't easy. Every smile they shared felt like a needle under my skin. But I kept reminding myself, you have bigger dreams than this. While Ryan was busy parading Emily around, I was staying late in the library, finishing assignments early, emailing professors for recommendations. I started tutoring for extra money, sometimes working weekends at the diner just to keep my savings growing. Every hour I spent building my future was another step away from him. Of course, Emily tried to poke at me. One afternoon, I was studying at my usual table when they walked in. She tugged him toward the seat closest to mine. "Oh, Ryan, remember that trip we're taking next month?" she said loudly, just as I was underlining a passage in my textbook. "We'll have so much fun. Too bad not everyone gets to travel like that." I didn't even lift my head. I murmured, flipping the page. Another time, at a student event, she accidentally dropped a photo on the floor, a selfie of her and Ryan at some rooftop bar. When I handed it back, she smiled sweetly. "You can keep it if you want, for old time's sake." I smiled right back. "I'm good, thanks." It was strange. Every time I didn't react, I saw something flicker in Ryan's eyes. Confusion. Maybe even frustration. Because for the first time since we'd met, I wasn't giving him the part of me that wanted his attention. I'd learned something important. Sometimes the loudest revenge is silence, and mine was just beginning. Finals week was a storm, but I had prepared for it like a soldier going into battle. While Ryan and Emily were busy posting photos of rooftop dinners and weekend getaways, I was buried in textbooks, highlighters staining my fingertips, the smell of coffee my constant companion. I wasn't just studying to pass, I was studying to leave. When the results came out, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. Top scores in my department. The kind of grades that couldn't be ignored by the prestigious college I'd applied to overseas. I stood there in front of the results board, my name printed at the very top, and for the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. A week later, I got the email. Congratulations, you have been accepted. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. This was it, my way out. And no one knew. Not even my closest friends. Especially not Ryan. The holidays came fast. I told my parents I'd been accepted, and their eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. We spent the last days of December packing, boxing up my things, selling the furniture I wouldn't need. It was bittersweet. I'd grown up in that small city, but I was ready to breathe new air. When we finally loaded the last box into the car, I stood in the driveway, staring at the only home I'd ever known. I wasn't running away from Ryan. I was running toward myself. Meanwhile, on campus, I was still a topic of conversation. Just not in the way I used to be. Emily sat at a table with Ryan and his friends one afternoon, sipping her latte. So, Claire's probably crying over her books again, she said with a smirk. Some people just don't know how to have fun. One of his friends laughed. Yeah, she's probably spending the holidays in that tiny apartment of hers. Pathetic. They chuckled, but Ryan didn't join in. Instead, he stared at the coffee cup in front of him, his thumb tracing the rim. He remembered the nights we used to share cheap takeout in my apartment, talking about everything and nothing. How I'd stay up with him during his all-nighters, quizzing him for exams, even when I had my own to study for. He'd never said it out loud, but I'd been there for him more than anyone. And now, I wasn't. Emily leaned toward him. Hey, are you listening? He blinked, forcing a smile. Yeah, just thinking. But his mind wasn't on her. It was on me, on the way I'd walked past him the other day without even slowing down. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. That was new, and it unsettled him. In his mind, I'd always be there, quiet, patient, waiting. But lately, there was something in my eyes, something that told him I was already halfway gone. The truth was, I was more than halfway gone. By the time the new semester started, I wouldn't just be in a different city. I'd be in a different country. And Ryan? He'd never see it coming. The holidays passed quietly for me. While Ryan was probably attending New Year's parties with Emily, I was already waking up in a new city, unpacking my suitcases, and walking through the gates of a college I'd once only dreamed of. It didn't feel real at first. The sprawling campus, the modern lecture halls, the hum of ambition in the air. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't his ex-girlfriend. I was just Claire. And that was enough. Back in our old city, Ryan had decided, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of something else, to drop by my apartment. He hadn't been there since before the breakup. When he knocked, no one answered. He tried again. Silence. He glanced through the small kitchen window. Empty counters. No books stacked on the table. No mug with chipped paint sitting by the sink. The place looked abandoned. Maybe she's just visiting her parents for the holidays, he told himself, but something in his chest tightened. The holidays ended, and campus buzzed again. Ryan walked into our old lecture hall on the first day, scanning the rows. I wasn't there. He checked the second row, the far corner by the window, my favorite spot. Still no sign of me. By the second week, confusion turned into irritation. Maybe I'd switched classes, maybe I was skipping, but the professors didn't seem to expect me either. It was during a casual chat in the cafeteria that he finally heard it. One of my old classmates, in passing, said, "Did you hear? Claire got into that international program." "She's already gone." Ryan froze mid-step. "What?" The guy blinked. "Yeah, she moved abroad. Guess she won't be coming back." Later that night, Ryan sat in his room, Emily's voice buzzing faintly from the other end of the phone as she talked about some weekend trip. But he wasn't listening. He was scrolling through my social media. The posts were different now. Pictures of my new city, the towering buildings, the little coffee shop near my dorm, smiles that didn't look forced. He called me. It rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. He messaged me, "Hey, can we talk?" Minutes passed. No reply. Another message, "I didn't know you were leaving. Why didn't you tell me?" Nothing. He switched to every platform, DMs, old email threads, even the tutoring group chat we once shared. But my silence was absolute. For the first time since our breakup, Ryan wasn't in control. And somewhere deep inside, under the pride and the ego, a quiet panic began to grow. Because now he knew I wasn't just gone from his life, I was building one without him. The city became my teacher. It taught me how to walk fast, how to read faces, how to find my way through streets that twisted like a puzzle. At first, everything felt too big, too loud, too much. I missed the quiet corners of my old life, even the small kitchen in my apartment back home. But slowly, it became mine. The coffee shop, 2 blocks from my dorm, learned my order. The librarian at the research wing always kept new books aside for me. I found friends who didn't care where I came from, only where I was going. And I stopped looking over my shoulder. The first year was survival. The second was discovery. By the third year, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Graduation came with a flood of emotions. As I crossed the stage, my name was called, and the applause felt like a long exhale after years of holding my breath. I had done it. Every late night, every sacrifice, every quiet moment I'd chosen myself over the noise, it all led here. A month later, the offer letter came. One of the top firms in the city. A position I dreamed about but never dared to believe could be mine. When I saw my name at the top of that document, I pressed my hand to my mouth and laughed through tears. The day I signed the contract, I took my parents out to dinner. Not just any dinner, the kind I used to walk past and wonder what it would be like to sit inside. We ordered without looking at the prices. My father raised his glass of sparkling water, his voice unsteady. "You've made us proud every day, Claire, but tonight you've made us proud beyond words." My mother's eyes glistened. "You worked so hard, my girl. You never gave up on yourself." I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled. I had to. I promised myself I would. We clinked glasses, the city lights spilling in through the windows, wrapping the moment in gold. Outside, the streets were alive with people chasing their own dreams. Inside, I knew I had caught mine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running away from something. I was running toward the life I'd always deserved. And I was just getting started.